Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm Finlo Costain. Scottish Government has published its plan to deliver on its world-leading Good Food Nation Act, which set out a legislative framework to help to ensure that everyone in Scotland can access nutritious and sustainable food. Nourish Scotland was at the centre of the push for the 2022 Act, and Pete Ritchie is its director. I asked him what's meant by a good food nation.
Well, it's certainly still out to the jury is what we mean. I'll say a bit more what it says in the Act itself and in the policy statements. But we just spent the morning working with some primary school children in Scotland who are going to be involved in consultation about the Good Food Nation plan. And we asked them the very same question right at the beginning of the lesson. And there were some lovely comments, so a nation filled with people eating healthy food. And they go on to say, but P6 and 7 have to pay for school meals. They should be free. So very concrete things for the kids in P6 who've now just had to start paying for their school meals where they didn't for the first 5 years. Another child says, more fish, we eat more fish, more produce from the sea was a big thing, even though in Dundee it's not noted for its fishing fleet. And then another child said, a good food nation is having a salad every week or so. And I think I could certainly buy that one. So in a sense, a good food nation is whatever you want it to be. But in the Act, what it talks about in the policy document that comes before that, it talks about people in Scotland from every walk of life, which is a very inclusive thing, taking pride and pleasure in the food they eat every day. And at the same time, reducing the environmental impact of the food system and reducing the impact of dietary-related diseases. So there's a very clear health, climate, environment, but also this really important point about pride and pleasure. It's about a nation where actually people think food's a source of enjoyment. It builds social cohesion. It's something that we're interested in, and in a sense, we can. It's almost easy to talk about what's not a good food nation in a way, in some of the aspects of our food culture, which have become really depleted, as well as the wider environmental and health impacts of it. So I think we've all got a sense of, we'd be a nation which has regional variation like Italy, which reduces food waste like Austria, which has a connection to territory like the Nordics, which has a sort of willingness to spend a long time sitting around the table like France, there's different cultures we can see around the world where you can say, okay, that's a bit of a good food nation. Okay. That's some of what we want to capture in Scotland. But so it's about hard policy, not just about sort of nice ideas.
What are the particular powers that the Act set up to help deliver that good food nation?
The key thing is it sets duties. It's a framework bill, but the heart of the bill, and it's not a long bill, is that the Act is that it requires the Scottish Government to make a Good Food Nation plan, and it sets out essentially what that plan has to cover and what's got to be in it. So what it does is it brings together the food system into a single plan, is the idea, and it makes Scottish Government consider the food system as a whole, its environmental impact, its health impact, its inequalities impact, its impact on fair work. All of those different bits, animal welfare, have to be brought into the plan. That's the whole idea of it, is because, as you know, food doesn't belong to any one department. You get policy making in silos, often which is pushing against each other. So yeah, we want to support the food and drink industry. Sure, we want to create jobs. But if they're producing products which aren't keeping us well, then we've got a problem. We want farmers to do well. We want them to grow food. But if the emissions from their food production are messing up our climate targets, we need to change those things. And you have to look at those things in the round because they all have knock-on effects.
Does that duty that you mentioned run across all aspects of government in the same way that all areas of the Welsh Government have duties under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act?
It does. I mean, there's a detail in the Act about specified functions, which is too boring to go into. But broadly speaking, it runs across, health, education, environment, climate change, economy, rural policy, all the different bits all the different government departments, in a sense, would have a say on food policy. And one of the good things Scottish Government's been doing is running an interministerial group with people from all those different departments sitting around the table going, what are we going to do about food? And I think that's been a real step forward.
So the Act is in place and the challenge now turns to implementation. The Scottish Government has published its plans, but I don't think you were very impressed, Pete. Why was that?
Well, it's taken a while. I think it's been 18 months since the Act was passed to get this draft plan. We were expecting something, I think, a little stronger, both in terms of analysis and in terms of proposals. So on the analysis first, we didn't see, if you like, a very clear exposition of the systemic problems in the food system in Scotland, of which there are many, and understandably Brexit and COVID and the invasion of Ukraine hasn't made those things any easier for anybody, whether consumers or producers of food in Scotland. But it would have benefited from a much more granular analysis, I think, about some of the indicators we've got for food system performance in Scotland, and how we're doing, the impact of policies to date. So that would have been really helpful in a way that I think Henry Dimbleby set out quite well in the National Food Strategy, some of the sort of the context for why we need to take a food systems approach. But I think on the policy intent, I think it was weak in a whole number of areas where we were expecting, I think, a clearer direction of travel about which way we were going, whether that's trying to, reduce the promotions of high fat and sugar and salt food, whether it was about progressing the agriculture transition, whether it's reducing food waste, whether it was tackling issues about fair work. It doesn't really bring those together in any way with any new momentum or targets, or we're going to do this. So it reiterates a number of existing targets. It lists a number of existing policies. But I think our sense is that if we're going to make the sort of change we need to make in our food system, we need a much more ambitious approach, a sort of step change in how we do things, rather than, if you like, continuing business as usual and hoping that's going to deliver. When, for example, with our obesity numbers in Scotland, they haven't shifted in 20 years. So either it's okay, but if we don't think it's okay, what are we going to do to change it? Yeah. And we have just had really, really depressing life expectancy figures in Scotland. It's now gone down to under 45 for a man in the poorest areas of Scotland. Food isn't all of that, by any means, we don't think that. But food's something we can actually really focus on and try and fix and get right. But we wanted a greater sense of urgency and less of a sense that we're doing okay, because it's not people aren't trying, but we're not doing okay.
There's a degree to which it feels like the plan was rushed out to coincide with Burns Night. And if the Act is simply used to promote existing Scottish food and drink businesses, then it would have failed, won't it? So what are the key areas in which you want to see action?
Okay, we certainly want to see a wholehearted transition to healthy, sustainable diets. And we'd like to see that much more like the New Nordic Diet approach, 20 years of high-level government commitment to shifting the way we do food in Scotland, and I think the New Nordic Diet is a great example of that. There were lots of really specific examples around, like the whole grains initiative, doubled the consumption of whole grains in Denmark over a period of time. Now that's a massive change. It's really hard to change what people eat. The whole grains initiative, that might have been a good thing to do, for example. We wanted to see much clearer support for short food chains, market gardens, not because they're going to produce all our food, but because they bring people closer to their food. We wanted to see a big investment in, not just school food standards, which we have, which are great, but really trying to raise the whole profile of school food as a key thing to promote health and well-being, but also bring food much more into the curriculum of schools, not just learning to cook, but understanding the food system as a whole. And the kids we spoke to today, I think, were hungry for that sort of learning, and were already really, really well informed. It was really great to see that. So we want to see action on a number of fronts to make this food system change, and a real sense there's a high-level commitment to transforming the food system, while obviously maintaining jobs. We want to maintain jobs in the food sector, but what I think Scandinavian countries have shown is that it's possible to create a lot of new jobs, while changing, if you like, some of the fundamentals of how we do food. And we think we should have been more aspirational. We should have been drawn on more from other countries' experience. And we have a whole bunch of dead specific things you could do, from ending cages for animals, getting sows out of stalls, lots of things that are quite specific. But overall, we'd like to just see this sort of cross-departmental ambition, high-level commitment. And like you say, after a year and a half, we had hoped for a more sort of strategic launch, rather than what it felt like was, oh, it's Burns Night, let's have a Good Food Nation plan.
That was Pete Ritchie from Nourish Scotland. More news on our website 8.9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.